Hi everyone, this is Professor Benjamin, and you have finished week 2 of this course. So, because this week Tragedy of the Commons does not have a specific chapter in the textbook, you have no quiz due this week. So, by making your initial post and your response post, you completed the work for this week. So I want to do some housekeeping items and then take a sneak peek into what's coming up next week under session 3. Okay, a couple things, housekeeping items. Number 1, a lot of you never listened to my roundup from last week, and I'm hoping that you listen to my roundup for this week because it contains really helpful information about what I'm looking for in the posts, a little background information on the posts, on the articles, all of that kind of stuff. And I said last week that I wanted to make sure that you weren't answering those questions in a vacuum, that almost all the answers required Garrett Hardin to be used in the answers. And a lot of you, because you didn't listen to the roundup, or maybe you missed it in the roundup, you didn't do that. So couple things. Initial posts are supposed to be like mini papers. And I know we're all overwhelmed in this world, so we're just logging in and we're trying to get this post off our plate so we can cross something off our to-do list. The problem is in this class, because this is a science class, this is a non-lab science class, so it is not about our feelings, it's not about superficial stuff that we just scratched the surface. No, this is supposed to be where you're actually really analyzing information. And so a lot of us are missing that. We're missing the fact that we actually have to delve deep into the concept, which would require that we actually might have to spend more time on our posts, or even just more time reading the information and then thoughtfully thinking about it before we write our post. What I have a feeling is students are logging in, they're looking under the module, they're reading the article real quick, not even like super detailed, not even more than once. They're reading the article and then they're writing their answer just so they can get it off their plate. And that's great, and it works. Sometimes we get through with that. But a lot of times now that we're moving up to the next level is you actually have to analyze the information. So you actually have to think about it. You have to think about what you're saying and why am I saying this? Is this a contradiction to what Hardin's saying, or is this a contradiction to what the article's saying? And I think it's really important. So make sure you spend more time. I know we all are busy. You're probably taking 4 or 5 classes. You have a full-time job. You have kids. I understand. But unfortunately, our job as teachers is to teach you how to critically think about the information that's given to you, and especially because this is a non-lab science course. So this is taking the place of a science course in a lot of your pathways. So we need to make sure you're critically thinking in a scientific manner. Okay, so I take my job seriously. I take that important to know that at the end of the semester, my students are here. Okay, so please, I know we're all busy. We have tons going on. Look, it's Saturday morning and I've just spent 3 hours grading posts and now I'm going to make a video. I know, I'm trying to squeeze this in before I spend the rest of the weekend at soccer games for my kids so that I can try and get stuff out of the way. So please, I totally understand. The other thing is, initial posts need to have paragraphs, point blank. There should be an introduction, the body, and then a conclusion. So make sure that your posts have paragraphs. That means sometimes when you copy and paste in, you have to actually go in and make those paragraphs. The other thing is this. No I statement. So I believe, or in my opinion, or I think, or this is what I've read. No. Remove any I from it. It removes the personal information from it. You can say yes or no and have factual basis behind it, and that's the same thing. The other thing is a lot of you are just not sourcing properly. So you're like just writing stuff in your post, and then you just slap a web link or some sort of source at the bottom, and maybe you're using different information in your post or whatever. So that's really important that you're learning how to cite properly. If you don't know how to cite, YouTube is your friend. There's tons of videos on YouTube on how to cite properly. So just search YouTube, and find a video on how to properly cite MLA formatting. The other thing is this, or how to use in-text citations. The other thing is this, is that initial posts need to be at least 300 words, response posts at least 200 words, and you need to just make sure you're factually based. So if you make a statement, you have to say why you're making that statement and where that facts say that statement. Okay, so that's really important as well. But overall, I mean, there are a lot of bright lights. So you guys are doing a great job. I can see you're trying to work. I know we're all in a rush. It's the second week, but I'm worried that this is all going to come back to bite you at the end of the semester or at the midterm and final. Because remember, my midterm and final are all essay, and I expect really well-written answers for your midterm and essay. I mean, your midterm and final. So it's really important that you spend the time now. So if you look here under the module session, you'll see there are, this is what we covered this week. So this article, The Tragedy Commons by Garrett Hardin, is absolutely essential that you've read it. So a lot of you talked about privatization. You talked about that inherent need for greed, which is what Hardin says. That's why we abuse the commons. We look for that short-term gain rather than thinking about the long-term interests of society. And the reason that we do that is it's a mathematical equation, is that when I abuse the commons, I get a total +1. What happens is the negative is actually spread out amongst 7.5 billion people. So it's not felt as much. So that's why we are able to abuse the commons, because when I do it, I get all the gains from it. And my negatives are spread out amongst so many people that it's not really felt. And he specifically talks about this under the section in the article, Tragedy of Freedoms in the Commons. So it's really important that you read that article, because a lot of you talked about privatization, the Gulf oil spill, all this stuff, but you didn't bring Hardin in and say, well, the reason people do it is because the mathematical equation is it's going to be the same way all the time, which is that the negative is spread out amongst everyone, and then whoever it is who abuses the commons gets the total +1. So of course you're always going to abuse the commons. Mathematically, it comes out as a benefit to you to do that. So that's where I wanted to use Hardin in those examples. So privatization, it talks about privatization in national parks. There's a lot of problems with privatization in national parks. Number one is, yes, he's saying they're being overused. And yes, he's saying that we could do a lottery system, or we could do first come, first serve basis. And a lot of you talked about like long lines, or how does this lottery system work, which is right. But it's also a social justice problem, because if we have a lottery or first come, first serve, well, guess what? Certain socioeconomic classes are going to benefit from that than other individuals. So of course, lower socioeconomic classes are going to be the ones who are hindered most by the fact of a lottery system, because when you get your lottery in the mail, you might not be able to take off from work because you work a job where there's no vacation time given. So these are the problems with it. At the end of his article, he actually says, I am not comfortable with anything I say in this article. So you have to understand that he's saying that. He's saying, like, listen, like, I'm just not sure I agree with all this. There's a lot of social justice issues with this, with what I'm saying in this article. But what he's trying to do is show you all the problems with the technical solution. So he's being sarcastic when he says overuse of national parks and we should do this, this, and this. He's doing that because he wants you to see the problems with privatization and the problems with that technical solution of privatization. Okay, government ownership is a technical solution, but it seems to be working. While it stinks because who's ever in political office is the person who's in charge of those government oversights. Like President Trump has totally cut back on National Park Service. Us as voters can, of course, vote someone out of office and then allow that to change or show what we really want as citizens. So government ownership is needed to solve the commons issue. Does it get to the bottom, which he's saying is the issue, is there needs to be an extension of morality? No, it never gets to that. But it is, we need it. He talks about mutual corrosion, taxes, parking spaces. This is what seems to work the most for people too, is you pay a fine and then you change your behavior. So like the sugary soda tax, there's also been talk about implementation of a carbon tax. So all of this stuff would change our behaviors because we can't seem to do it ourselves, because we just look for the inherent need for greed rather than the long-term interest in society. The problem is you never get to the main issue of the problem, which is we should be educated on the facts, which is what we're doing is harmful to everyone. Okay, so that was it. A lot of invasive species talk. Yes, invasive species are bad, just point period. The spotter and lanternfly is a great example of this. So while it is not a tragedy of the common species, meaning brought in for human short-term gain, it has spread rapidly throughout the Philadelphia area. If you didn't see, there were articles on the news about it. The Philadelphia Police Department tweeted about it. So there was a lot. I found one in CCP's parking lot on Thursday. Actually, no, on Wednesday. I found a spotter and lanternfly, killed it on the spot, and reported it to the PA Department of horticulture because it's really important you report it. But yes, we've have an invasive of spider and lanternflies. If you see one, make sure you kill it. I'll put a little link in the announcement section this week about the spider and lanternfly. It kills all stone-bearing fruit trees, and it also leaves they leave like a little sap behind when after their eggs are spawned. They leave like this sap behind that kills trees. And so this is really important that if you see a spider and lanternfly, kill it. Kill it, kill it, kill it, kill it, kill it. It's not very good for the environment. Okay, so that was last week. This week we're going to cover economics, and policy. This relates to chapter 2 in your textbook. There's a lot of course to cover in this week. You have your initial post, response post due by Wednesday and Friday. You have a quiz due by Sunday, 11:59, September 22nd. This article helps talk a little bit about the intrinsic and instrumental value question. Intrinsic value is value unto itself, and it's a little bit of a difficult concept to understand, but I think you could get it. Instrumental value is what trees provide to us, which is really how we look at almost all of nature, is that we look at it as an instrument to our being rather than value unto itself. And this is kind of like a biocentric ethics point of view. So you want to look at that. Pricing the Priceless, this is a great article, and you will be asked about it, I think, on your midterm exam. It deals with how we put a price tag on nature. So you're going to tell me, no, you can't put a price tag on nature. And I'm going to say, yes, you can. We always put a price tag on nature. In fact, my life has a price tag on it. My life insurance policy. Your life has a price tag on it. If you have a life insurance policy, or if you die and your work gives you money based upon your death, that's how much you're worth. So cost-benefit analysis allows us to decide whether policies should be enacted or not, and what's the price tag we should put on it. And so I think it's really important. Now, there's a lot of problems with it, and your textbook talks about those problems, so does this article. Cap and trade, here are actually a couple articles on cap and trade, talk to us about a way that we've put an economic value on the environment. And so it has worked. There's controversies on both sides of it, so you'll see there's a wonderful little story of stuff about it. There's a lot of articles to and from whether it's good or bad. We tried this in New Jersey when I worked for New Jersey DEP, and it failed miserably just because we needed so much more government oversight of it and also regulating the market. So it's like a stock market, and if you don't regulate that price properly, then people aren't going to buy the trades on the market. So you'll find out a little bit more about it. And of course, I will recap all of this at the end of the week, but I want you to delve in and try and figure out what these terms mean before I round it up at the end of the week. Environmental injustice, we talk about this during this session. Really important. There's a lot of environmental justices throughout the world. Flint, Michigan is a wonderful example of it, is that we seem to take advantage, of course, of certain socioeconomic classes. It used to be just based on race, but now it's due to lack of education, lack of income of individuals. Fracking is a good example of lower class white individuals being taken advantage of. Flint, Michigan, of course, is African American being taken advantage of, lower economic African Americans being taken advantage of. But you'll also see and hear how military individuals are taken advantage of with the environmental justice case at the North Carolina military base. But also, another great example of this is very close by. So out at the Willow Grove Air Force Base, there's tons of contamination out there. People have had contamination to their drinking water and soil for years, and they didn't know about it. So these are environmental injustice issues. Okay, so that's a little introduction to this week. Some of the questions, make sure you leave your personal feelings out of the questions. How have our natures changed throughout history? This can be found in the textbook, and I want you to include monotheistic religions in there. I know a lot of you are going to not be happy with me, but monotheistic religions definitely have changed our view on nature, meaning we've put God above nature, meaning man is in charge of nature, and this is a huge problem and has caused our detachment a little bit, so I want you to look into that. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You may not find that much information on Emerson and Thoreau, so you may actually, transcendentalism, you may actually have to go and look at some of that stuff in outside sources. So I'm okay with just that question, you using outside sources. That was one more thing I want to just end with. Please use sources I have given you. A lot of you went and looked up some, I don't know, liberty.org or something website to find an easier way instead of reading the article of Tragedy of the Commons, and I will be honest, I'm not happy with what they have to say. I think it's very biased and opinionated, and it doesn't have factual basis to it. So be sure you know where you're getting information from, who is that web source, what is the funding backing that web source, okay? Have a fantastic week. Of course, always reach out if you have any questions.